Since the first Americans enlisted into the Marine Corps at Tun Tavern in 1775, the traditions of honor, courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice have been passed down to new generations of Marines. From the moment a new recruit steps on the yellow footprints, they begin to learn about the history of the Marine Corps and are inspired by the stories of Marines at Chosin Reservoir, Sugarloaf Hill, Iwo Jima, and Fallujah. Their basic training teaches them what it takes and means to be a United States Marine.
I went in January of '44. Went from there after sworn in Chicago, went to San Diego, boot camp. Actually, my basic training was very simple. The only thing we did was march in the rifle range. Every day inspection.
In December in Pearl Harbor, I joined the Marine Corps and didn't leave until January 1942. Went to the Marine base in San Diego. After basic training there, we went out to Camp Elliott, close to San Diego. Was there 4 or 5 months or more. Then we walked to Camp Pendleton. We were the first Marines at Camp Pendleton, sometime in August 1942. See. There were just 2 barracks up there.
I joined the Marine Corps on October the 29th, 1950, in Denver, Colorado. I was transferred to San Diego boot camp. Was there from November through January 1951. From August, I got orders to report to Camp Pendleton, where I went through a rigid training schedule to go to Korea of 1951.
Well, I was working in Decatur, Illinois, and the war had started in Korea, and I knew I was ripe to be drafted. I didn't care to do that. I had 2 brothers that were already in the Marine Corps, and I was going to be drafted. I knew that, so I wanted to be just as good as they were. So I joined the Marines, and after we were sworn in, the next day we were put on a train and sent to Parris Island, South Carolina, for our boot camp.
I joined the Marine Corps in August of 1958, just as soon as I could after I got out of high school. I would have joined before if I could have gotten in, but my parents wouldn't sign the papers, and I hadn't graduated from high school. But I went to boot camp in San Diego, California, to MCRD, Marine Corps Recruit Depot. Went up to Camp Pendleton for ITR, Individual Training Regiment.
February 1965, I pre-enlisted. 1965, February, 120-day program. And then when I graduated high school, like 13 of June's when I went active, went down, took a bus down to St. Louis, and from St. Louis we flew out to L.A., International Airport in them days. When we stepped, it was like close to midnight or whatever. We got off the plane, a bunch of us, and this sergeant came up with this what they call cattle cars, and what they had benches in them. When we loaded this thing up with us, then they trucked us down about an hour drive down to Pendleton, or San Diego actually. Took us down there to boot camp. And about midnight we unloaded and got our haircuts, stood on the yellow feet. Everybody has to stand on the yellow feet.
I went into service in October of 1969. I served till August of 1973 on active duty. I went through physical at AFES in Chicago, flew out to San Diego, California, and entered boot camp at San Diego, MCRD San Diego.
Joined the Marine Corps in March 1999, served until March of 2008. Went to boot camp at Parris Island. After that, went to SOI, and then was stationed at Lejeune. I did my first deployment out of Lejeune, the 24th MEU. That led into the invasion of Iraq in 2003. After that, I was re-enlisted, transferred over to Kaneohe Bay with 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. Did a deployment to Afghanistan in 2005 to the Korangal Valley. And then last deployment was back to Iraq in Haditha.
I enlisted in the Marines in February of 1976, and it's something I'd always wanted to do, but it was 1975, and there was no encouragement from counselors or people to do that. Even my own father wanted me to finish college before I enlisted. And going back, I remember when I was about 12, I read a book called Marine at War. It was the Battle of Okinawa. And as I read it, I just thought, what can they do to make these people do what they are doing so brave? It must be the varsity team. I want to try that. But when I did enlist, I told them I only wanted to be in the infantry. I didn't want to do anything else. I wanted to find out what those guys are doing in the island battles of World War II. So I went to San Diego. Huge eye opener. I thought I was kind of tough, and found out very quickly that I wasn't.
Dick Whitaker from Saugerties, New York, joined the Marine Corps in June of 1944. He would serve with the 6th Marine Division at the Battle of Okinawa. After Whitaker was sworn in at Albany, New York, he was put on a bus for Parris Island.
Second day I was on Parris Island, and it's a shock. Right from the beginning, it's a shock. They pick us up at Yamasee in cattle trucks. We've been traveling for a whole day. This Marine comes up to the truck. He's spotless in this khaki uniform with a Smokey Bear. All the DIs at Parris Island wear those hats. He walked around all the way around the truck, about 2 times, maybe 3, just looking up at us, just like this, you know. No smile, anything. He finally stopped and he said, "Welcome to my island." That was the beginning. It never ended. Week after week, they try to break you down, and they do break you down. They turn you into something else.
That's what the Marine Corps does. I mean, it just takes that old civilian attitude out of you and makes you think their way. And that's what it's all about, Marine Corps-wise. Thinking their way. There is no individuals anymore, you know, according to the Marine Corps, until you get through basic. Once you get out of basic, then you can think a little bit for yourself.
When they get out of boot camp, that's when they really know they're proud to be a Marine. They learn a lot. You didn't do nothing unless he told you. And you said, "Yes, sir," "No, sir." You know, you've done this smart aleck stuff. You learned you got that taken care of right quick like.
They take the first third of your boot camp and break you down from your civilian self to try to make a military person out of you. And it is discipline. You learn discipline, you learn respect, you learn history. They teach you how to be a Marine.
Bill Pierce from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, joined the Marine Corps in 1943. He was sent to basic training at Parris Island. Pierce would be transferred to the Hingham Naval Ammunition Depot in Massachusetts, then to Camp Lejeune for weapons training. Upon completion of training, he would be assigned to the weapons company of the 6th Marine Division at Okinawa.
We were schooled on a lot of weapons. Machine guns, BARs, rifles, you name it. The rising submachine guns is actually what they gave us, which is a terrible weapon. But anyhow, I think I was there for maybe 7 months, 6, 7 months, and 10 or 12 of us were transferred down to Lejeune, and the next thing I know, they lined us up and said, "You're going in weapons company." We said, "What the hell is weapons company?" A weapons company, it turned out, was tanks, but there are no turret on the tanks in weapons company. They're open-top tanks.
similar to a half-track. But they had 105 millimeter guns on them, which is pretty powerful. 105 millimeter is like an artillery weapon. They were primarily used or schooled to be an anti-tank weapon, as weapons company was primarily to be used against tanks. But unfortunately on Okinawa, we used to pray to see a tank. We never did see one. Very good training at Lejeune, the rifles. Even trained with a sergeant walking behind you through paths in the woods. And he'd say, keep an eye open. He'd step on something and a silhouette would pop up behind shrubbery. Or remember one time he said to me, now keep your eye on the trees, make sure you're looking on. I looked up on a tree and I saw a silhouette flash, and I dropped to my knee and fired at it. And we used live ammo. And I got hell for dropping on my knees. One knee, actually. He said, don't you ever do that. By the time you drop to your knee, you're dead. It's good training. And we put in rifle pits, shoulder high, fired at targets, silhouettes, put bayonets on at night, 20 yards, 10 yards from the silhouettes, fired. Excellent training.
I qualified as a rifle marksman. I couldn't hit the target when I started. I had been a hunter, pheasant hunter, when I was a kid, but they taught me how to shoot. Sight alignment, trigger squeeze, hold them and squeeze them.
From 500 yards on the M16 in the prone position, I put 10 rounds in the 12-inch black circle. And that's far, no, not black circle, it was a silhouette. And that's far enough when you put the front sight on the silhouette, you can no longer see it. And you have to pull down until you see the top of the head, and then you begin squeezing the trigger.
That's one thing the Marine Corps insisted. Everybody's an infantryman. I don't care what rank you are, what position you are, whatever you think you are. You had to qualify, and you learned to shoot for survival reasons. And if you got a hand shot up, you use the other hand.
When you go overseas, you know exactly why you're going. You are a trained killer. You can hit a target at 500 yards with that rifle. And know you're going to hit it because you've practiced so long with it. And that's the whole idea. Other services don't practice the rifle like we do.
After Fallujah, the Army did a study because they thought Marines were executing prisoners, and because so many were shot in the head. And there were no flash burns. It's just that if you stick your head up near a Marine, you'll get a bullet in it.
I think it was about the second day at Parris Island. We went down to either draw clothing or something. And we went to the main base. There is one, in those days, there was one big brick building that was the base headquarters. Everything else was wood. And there was a sign hanging over the street, like on oilcloth, big letters. And the sign said, "Let no mother ever say her son died in combat because of lack of training." And I remember looking at that and thinking, these people are serious. This is no cakewalk here. They're going to kill me. And then you go through this, they are trying to kill me. They'll march you till you pass out and stuff like that. And I finally, you fight it off mentally. I remember thinking, if they kill me here, what good am I to them overseas?
They're trying to break you down in a lot of different ways and try to make you part of the team. And the number one thing is, mission first, and then everything else comes after that. And if that means, putting your life at risk, and then that's what you have to do to accomplish the mission.
The mission that you're given is superior to anything, including you and your people's health. Now, you don't throw that health away, but when everybody has rifles, somebody's going to get hurt. You want to minimize how many people get hurt, but the mission means you don't not do the mission because somebody might get shot. You try to minimize the people while you accomplish the mission. Some of the missions are going to be a lot of people get shot. A lot of people will get hurt.
A mission's everything. You got to accomplish that mission. Whatever your orders are, you're going to set out to do it the fastest way possible, the best way possible, with the least amount of expense, either physically or monetarily. So it is a commitment to the mission.
You got to put 150 pounds and carry it as long as you need to. And you have to be able to climb hills and mountains and jump out of airplanes and be extremely physically fit and do all these tasks. And then when it's all said and done, be able to throw that pack off and grab your rifle and knowingly and willingly and enthusiastically do something that's going to cause 30% of you to die.
You do whatever is necessary in the situation. And they train you to take the hill or to whatever they do in training. But when it comes down to the fact that you've got to function, you do whatever you have to do to survive and to win and so forth. And I think that's what that type of training in the Marine Corps teaches you, that.
You did what you was told. I mean, if they tell you to take a hill, you didn't question it.
You said yes sir, no sir, whatever. You didn't question the orders. You just went and did them.
And they'd instill on you that you are the greatest. And we're sure we are. We knew, or at least myself, I knew I was going to survive. Well, everybody had that same feeling, and needless to thousands of them didn't survive. But you just felt like you were invincible, that you could whip anybody that came towards you, And thankfully, I was able to accomplish that.
We're tough. They instill you to be tough. I mean, fighting, it don't matter if you're a little bitty guy or whatever, you come up with an attitude, nobody going to beat you.
We fought for one another. So the country is important, but when we're out there in that situation, one another is what's important.
You can depend on everybody. They're not going to leave you by yourself or whatever. If you're pulling out, being overwhelmed, there's going to be somebody with you. You're not going to be the last man standing, so to speak.
Well, you never left a man in the field, dead or alive. You got him. You brought him back. That's one thing they instilled in us in Vietnam, too. My whole time, I never had a man that was left in the field, dead or alive. We got him out, and then we all come out.
Junior Montgomery from Rochester, Indiana, joined the Marine Corps in 1941 after the attack at Pearl Harbor. Before joining the 6th Marine Division at the Battle of Okinawa, Montgomery was a member of the 3rd Marine Raider Battalion and received specialized training before going to Bougainville.
At New Caledonia, there was a captain sitting there, and anybody wanted to enlist in the Raiders. They was forming our 3rd Raider Battalion. We were trained to stay 30 days behind the lines, living off of the country. Chickens, worms, or different things you can eat. We were trained that way. There was a general that went over and watched the Chinese for a few years, and that they had groups like that, and so he thought this country needed it. They were very special and could do almost the impossible.
We had almost 2 years of training before we actually went into combat. So we were pretty anxious when it came time to make a landing on Bougainville. The surf was terribly high, and almost every boat that landed broached. But I was in the first wave, one of the first ones ever touched the beach there, and we got some mortar and artillery fire. Didn't encounter any of the Japanese, but there after one day there, we boarded amphibian tanks and went out through all the high surf, making it some way down and made another landing at another point down on Bougainville.
One night, the Japs came up during the night. We dug in in a circle on that trail we was guarding. And the Japs come in during the night. We could hear thumping. We couldn't figure out what, a dog digging underground? That's what it sounded like. And it went on most of the night. And when we woke up the next morning, they was ready to fight. And we were yelling at each other. They was yelling, "Die, Marines, die." More blood for Roosevelt. That was on Bougainville. It was a terrible island to be on.
After Bougainville, Les Gadbury would be sent to the Second Battle of Guam on July 21, 1944. He can be seen in this picture carrying his machine gun tripod up a hill. The Marine behind him carrying the barrel is Randall Hackenberg, who was later killed in action on Iwo Jima. Then, in February 1945, Gadbury and the 3rd Marine Division would take part in the battle at Iwo Jima.
When it came around for our time to go to Iwo Jima, they were saving the 3rd Division to land on Japan. That was the whole idea. And so we went up to Iwo Jima, lying at anchor and, patrolling back and forth in case we needed to land. And about the 2nd or 3rd day, our 21st Regiment from the 3rd Division landed. And about the 5th day, they raised the flag up. But they still were exactly where they landed. They hadn't advanced north at all. D+5, I guess the day we landed, down by the south end of the island, real close to Surabaya. And so the next day we moved out and attacked to the north, the No. 2 airport, and that's where all the real terrible fighting was. So we stayed there until April the 6th when we left Iwo Jima. What was left of us, our company, we landed, I think, had 206 men. 56 were killed, and I don't know how many others, wounded. But when we left, I don't think there was many more than 13 or 17 of the original group, landing group in our company. And our company is no different than other companies. B Company, for example, I think they only had 6 men left. Got under a barrage one time. I was lying down, at the No. 2 airport, and barrage hit us and just picked me up, and I went flying through the air. And so I landed on my 2 feet. And right where I've been lying, 2 other poor guys there. There were two guys there. One cut the top of his head was off, and the other had a great big hole in his kidney, right exactly the spot where I've been lying. So, but sometimes you get in those conditions like that, it's pretty tough. And about the same time, I saw something fly up into the air, looked like a rag or something. It was just a Marine's body being blown that high. And like I tell one guy, move in closer to me. They're shooting through here. Bang, right square in the back of the helmet and out his ear. Grabbed my arm so tight you can, say, well, that's the death grip you ever felt. And a few days after that, the guys are reaching up, going to get one of my last boys, going to get something out of there, out of his pack. I said, you better get out, too late in the game to be taking any chances. I'll be darned, about that time, he fell right back on me, shot in the back, and he died instantly almost. He said, I'm dying, Gadbury, and that was about it. So just so many things. Just an inch here or a second there, We made a night attack. Gosh, we were stuck up there, 3 of us in a foxhole up there for 2 or 3 days all by ourselves. I remember one evening, two of our tanks come up with a bunch of new replacements with them. They got up there just even with us, and I heard the Japanese open up on those tanks. And one of them was on fire immediately. The guys come scampering out of the top. Some other guys over hauling corpsmen. Some of them had been hit, and the other tank never moved either. They knocked it out, but I never did see anyone come out of the top of it. So they all went back, saying there we went. Finally, we got the word to pull back. Then we made a big circle around the place there. They call it Cushman's Pocket. We came in from the back side of them, and that's where I lost the last boy out of my squad. I felt so bad about him. I thought he'd make it. General Graves Erskine, he said it wasn't a doubt. There never was a doubt whether we'd be able to take the island or not. The doubt was whether to have anyone left to bury or dead when it was over.
I think it was 52 days aboard ship going to Iwo. We didn't know where we was going until we hit in Saipan. We left Saipan. They announced that they was going. They claimed it was going to be a 3-day operation. When we hit the island, we was waking at 3:30 in the morning. Served anything you wanted for breakfast. 6:30 was down in the VP boat, rendezvousing and waiting for the call, waiting for the flag to drop. We circled, constantly circling. And I think it was HR was at 9 o'clock, and like I say, I was about the 6th wave, and someplace I was guessed between 11:30 and noon, I hit the island. Some also on the beach yelling, "Get off the beach, get off the beach, get off the beach," because it was dead and wounded all over the place. Yeah. Like I say, you couldn't hit the ground when you hit the beach. Your foot didn't, you hit somebody, or you didn't know if he was alive or not. They had a tunnel all the way from Sarabanci to the other end. You could hear them at night talking if you're near a foxhole. And when we found it, they never discovered them until we landed. The Air Force and everybody bombed them for 90 some odd days and didn't touch one of them because they buried caves, the tunnels. They even have a hospital down below there, the ground. And we were ordered not to go down. You couldn't go down because you don't know where it was down there. And the only thing that really helped us more than anything else was the flamethrowers. They had done a wonderful job. We collect material, guns, ammunition, everything, and then we on the line. For when you went up there, whoever you was told to do, whatever they told you, what officer or whoever the leader, you done what they told you to do, and until they move up, and we didn't move up with them. We all usually stayed in the same position, and then we were back towards the Sarabanci. And on Mountain 362 position there, I lost my 3 buddies, real good buddies. We was together all the time, and we was moving up, and they hung together all the time. All 3 of them hung together. And I was moving up on the side, and I yelled at him to break it up, and it was too late. So I think one fell short. I think they was killed by a friendly fire because we was moving up on that hill 362, and the Navy was bombing everything around there, and I think that's where they got it. All 3 of them together, right together. And the one boy was an older boy. And there I can see him now. They're laying there on the ground, and he's got his arms around the 2 of them.
We experienced the normal rifleman's duties the whole tour that I was in Korea. I was assigned with the dog company of the 5th Marines. We were just in the area of Pork Chop Hill, and I was not at the reservoir, but we were in that area later, the chosen reservoir. We were within about 10 miles of that. And no matter where you were, they could always reach you with artillery. And, so it was dangerous. If you were in the infantry, which I was, the only time you had any rest was when you were moving from one place to the other. You would be taken off the front line. And I remember one time, we were taken off the front line. We were moving across the country, and we were in supposedly a safe area. So we decided we'd have a little game of softball. Well, it got interrupted by mortar rounds. So there was really no safe place. We were on Hill 812 when I was to come back home. And just the day before I was to come back home, I was checking on my squad. And all of a sudden I saw movement. I whirled around with my rifle, and there stood a Chinese person. He did not have a weapon. If he had it, I would have been shot. He was dressed in complete white. I mean, anything, all you could see was his nose. So we took him prisoner, and the interpreter we had with us asked him how come he surrendered. He had crawled all night to get to our line. He said he was an ammo carrier, and they would labor all night long hauling out mortar rounds and everything to the front line, and he said as soon as they started to fire those rounds, the Americans would fire 100 for every one they fired, and he decided the odds were not in his favor, so he snuck off and surrendered.
Me, a 79 guy, which is like a oversized shotgun, short-barreled, whatever. Then the radio man and the sergeant, and then two other infantry guys. 6 of us is out there. We went out on patrol. Me and the 79 guy set up front, up on top of the hill, the way we're going out the next day. The sergeant and the radio guy were in the middle, somewhere down the trail a little bit, and the other two were a little bit further down the trail back, setting up for the night. We set some trip flares and whatever, and then that next morning I went out to pick up my trip flare and with a butcher knife and a hand grenade, and they opened fire on me, the enemy did. And then a 50 caliber, communist 50 caliber, because it was green basketballs, not purple or orange or red like ours. They said green ones are communist 50 calibers. I had my 79 guy fall back a little bit to the sergeant and tell him, find a hole. I told him, I said, find a hole in that camp and fire 4 quick rounds you can, make them think we got mortar support. We're bigger than what we think. And pretty soon I heard boom, 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 boom. He had 4 of them. I got them off, and they fell behind where they were at, but made them think we had a 50 or mortars in support, a little bigger unit than they thought we were. Got off the hill and scurried for 3 days longer, hid and whatever, and then we got picked up that next morning, like a Friday, and evacuated out. That's what I got the Bronze Star for, because I tripped the ambush. And then it called in artillery, air bombs for that area once we got it picked up and got out of there, because we knew they were out there. It was a pretty good sized unit out there. But they got a 50 caliber, they got men powered behind it. And my old gunny from Recon Battalion was a first lieutenant. He says, you want to go to Vietnam, or I got a quota for a sergeant in Okinawa. I said, okay, I'll take that quota. I can always transfer. So I stayed on Okinawa for about 6 months. Just after my birthday, again, I'm going back to Vietnam. Fifth day of January, somewhere around there. I'm back into Vietnam. And my CO there, I was assigned to Hotel 25, which is a what they call runt regiment, but they needed a sergeant. Tet offense is going on about that time, starts out. Well, with the infantry unit, E5, whatever, I about ready to get my time in, overseas time, and I figured might as well take a third tour. I was planning on re-up and then the Marine Corps. You had to be 6 months less to be in the Marine Corps. And I was just about 1 week, 2 weeks from being that time. And on my last patrol, I tripped a booby trap, and that put me out of the Marine Corps.
After serving for 13 months as an embassy guard in Budapest, Hungary, Paul Lewis received orders to go to Rome. Instead, he volunteered to go to Iran. On November 3, 1979, Lewis arrived in Tehran and found the city was in total chaos.
I was shocked from the time I landed in the airport. It's a complete, the term failed state wasn't used at the time, but I just wandered into a failed state. I do remember there was a policeman at the airport standing in a corner, looked like he slept in his clothes, and he had a rip in his pocket. And there were just a bunch of bearded young men with field jackets and automatic weapons. The Marines picked me up in an armored van, and it was like watching a Mad Max movie. No one was obeying traffic signals. There was a burning trash can about every second block, and no one is in charge of the country. Everybody's in charge of their little section, little militia, controlled territory. It didn't take an expert to know we were just in deep trouble. We had this large compound of the 28 acres in a city of 4 or 5 million people, and it appeared to me that everybody hated us.
The next morning, after only being in Tehran for 14 hours, Lewis was told by other Marines that the embassy was being attacked. They were instructed to wait for help to arrive.
I called in, and I had 4 other Marines with me who knew the area. I was a senior Marine, so even though I'd been there a day, I was in charge. So I called to see if we should go to we were cut off if we should go to a Western embassy, and they told us to sit tight. They didn't want to scatter around the town, and help was on the way. I did point out to them that there were some new people showing up with weapons who were smoking cigarettes, talking to the people attacking the area. It didn't appear to me that any of the militia they'd hired for protection were functioning, but we were told to sit tight, so we did. Matter of fact, they told us to unbarricade the door. They didn't want to cause any friction. So finally they came and got us. We signed off that we were being captured, destroyed our radios. And one thing people don't understand, the Marine detachment and embassies are tasked with the internal security of the embassy itself. And the rules of engagement are very strict. You can only fire your weapon to save the life of yourself or another American. But the primary task is to protect the classified material and the integrity of the embassy. I can tell you for a fact that if they told the Marines that were not captured to fire, they would have gladly fired. And even though I was captured, I would have entirely been okay with that. But the result would have been you'd have killed maybe a few thousand Iranians, and then we'd have lost all of us. And we understood that was what we would prefer to do, but it would cause more than we weren't entitled to. We weren't entitled to impact international relations. And the big memory was the crowds are massive. I have no idea how many people are out there, but the chance. In the initial couple months, I was held in a small house used for TAD employees. The gunny lived in one, but it's pretty close to the front gate and near the motor pool. And the shouts of the crowd, physically reverberated through our body. The chanting was a physical sense. And I remember asking after an interrogation, I said, what are these guys yelling at? What's the Makbar? I could understand America, but I know it was actually Makba. And it's a death to America, and that was chanted over and over and over by what appeared to be hundreds of thousands of people.
After months of interrogation, physical assaults, solitary confinement, and threats of death by the Iranians, Lewis refused to provide his captors with information or make statements against the United States. During those first months, he attempted to determine what classified material had been compromised during the takeover of the embassy. When his captors made an accusation against America, he told them to prove it. They would then show him classified documents to support their allegations. After his release, Lewis was able to provide information which assisted the U.S. government in assessing the damage caused to national security. Paul Lewis's actions showed his dedication to the United States of America and his loyal devotion to duty that reflected great credit upon himself, the Marine Corps, and to the Marines who served before him.
Someday, I'm going to have to come home and I have to talk to someone from me that served on Iwo Jima and did, things that people don't do normally in a good fashion. I thought I might have to look them in the eye and said I brought no dishonor to this uniform.
Throughout the history of the Marine Corps, there have been Marines who have shown extraordinary bravery and courage, who have gone beyond the call of duty to help win a battle or save lives of other Marines. From the start of basic training, Marines learn about these acts of heroism and are inspired by their acts of bravery.
You learn about the heroes, Chesty Puller, Dan Daly. I can't call them all right now, but there's a bunch of them.
Inspire you. I mean, every night when we were in our barracks in boot camp, they'd say, "Good night, Chesty Puller." Yeah, Chesty Puller was from the frozen Chosin Reservoir in the Korean War. And Puller, we'd say good night to him all the time. Yeah.
Of course, the Marines through World War I were the Devil Dogs, named so by the German troops. And then World War II, they made a name for themselves in the Pacific. And a lot of them sacrificed everything they could to establish that name, United States Marines.
Bud Sloan, he was killed. He was Okinawa, he was on Guadalcanal, Medal of Honor man, which had a chance to, he could have stayed in the States if he wanted to, but he decided to stay with his outfit. So he was killed there. I think he was killed on the second day.
These people are honored and revered. And just because those are the things that ordinary people do. Chesty Puller wasn't, John Basilone weren't Olympic athletes who joined the Marines. They were just people who did what Marines do.
One of the examples there, when I went to Iwo Jima in 2005, I met Jack Lucas, who joined the Marine Corps when he was 14 years old. He turned 17 6 days before they landed on Iwo Jima. And just 2 or 3, 4 days later, the Japanese threw grenades down, and 2 grenades, and he jumped on one of them. One of them was a dud, and he got a hold of the other one and shoved it down in the black sand and saved it. He got the Medal of Honor for that.
Once in a while you get an act of bravery that, happens. The guy he knows he's got to do it, so he might be shot 5, 6 times and still carry on doing his job, or get killed in the accident, because they care for their friends. You're all family, and you take care of your buddies. And if he got wounded, you carried him out. Even the corpsmen were Navy. The corpsmen followed the Marine Corps spirit, I guess you call it. They took care of wounded no matter what.
Along the way, you become indoctrinated at the Marine Corps history, and there's a huge, it's not directed by officers or senior enlisted people, but everybody knows that there's a very high standard set by others, and you want to at least keep track. There's no way that in peacetime we could do what the guys on Iwo Jima did, but we could do the best we could to make sure that tradition continued.
The history and what those people before you went through, what they accomplished, and you do not want to let those people down. You don't want to be the first one to leave a bad taste in somebody's mouth about their service. You don't want to be the one that turns around and goes the other way, because you got Marines on your left and right that they're not going to do that. I was an avionics guy. I worked on helicopters. I didn't shoot a rifle very much. I could if I had to, and they would have made me if it was necessary. But it was very important for me to keep those planes flying, to keep those radios and instruments operational so they could do their job. What would happen if I let them people down? You got a plane full of Marines and pilots and gunners. What would happen, if I didn't do my job best I could? Everybody makes mistakes. Accidents happen. It's a dangerous business. But you're going to try to do the best you can every time you do it.
Just anybody can be a SEAL team member. Not everybody can be a Delta Force guy. And there's only 189,000 Marines. That's kind of a pretty select club that does everything very well.
It's an honor to know that there's so few of us, and to know that what it takes to be a Marine, that it's not just something that's handed out lightly.
I have all the respect in the world for other members of the military. They do their job, but it's a little special to be a Marine.
The Marines are well known, well respected, Other servicemen deserve every bit of respect also. I'm not putting any of them down, but it's hard for me to believe that there's any better Corps than the Marine Corps. A true-blooded Marine. As they say, once a Marine, always a Marine. That's true.
To me, being a Marine is that you've gone through boot camp and that you've served honorably with integrity and done what was asked of you.
I was always with people who wanted to be the very best in what we thought was a pretty select group of people. And I think that's kind of a Marine Corps thing. Whatever you're doing, you want to do it better than anyone else, at least as well as you can. If you don't win, it's not because you didn't try. So everywhere I went, we worked very hard at being the very best. And it just became habit. And I think that's part of the Marine Corps is everybody just wants to be the best at what they do, whether it be running a 3-mile run, attacking a hill.
We were really true comrades. I never ever had an argument with anybody. We all got along real well, very well, and nothing but respect for one another.
It's just such a comradeship. You can rely on everybody around you.
Yeah, I mean, I think every Marine that I can pick out and say we're in the Marine Corps, it's an instant connection. Like it doesn't matter if you never met them before, or you can instantly connect with them, and you ask them where were you stationed at, what unit, what MOS. You can, the next thing you know, you could probably be having some beer somewhere.
There's a camaraderie between Marines that I'm sure there's similar situations in other militaries, but it's none like the Marines. You see a Marine on the street, I don't care if he's the richest man you ever met or the poorest man, they were Marine, they're your brother.
I think when a Marine meets a Marine, it's just like meeting a family member. And I don't know that feeling is the same with other branches. But the Marines are very true to one another, even to this day.
I served 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days on active duty, and I got out, and I'm proud of everything I did. I'm proud of the Marines, and I'm proud of my service, and I don't want to be a blowhard about it or anything, but I think I did a pretty good job, and I'm just glad that I kind of upheld the tradition of the Marine Corps and of my dad and my great-grandfather and all the guys that came before me and all the good Marines and soldiers that paid the price to keep this country free.
Just the word Marines enough. That's all you have to know. What it stands for, that's all. That's the best thing there is. So everybody's just as proud of their outfit, as same as the Navy personnel, Army, all of it. They're all proud of the outfit they serve with. I'm sure they do. And I know I'm proud that I served with the Marine Corps, and I'm glad I did. I wouldn't change it for anything.
General Joseph Dunford, who earned the nickname Fighting Joe during the Iraq War, said in a speech, "Marines today fight and win for the same reason that we have always fought and won throughout our history. Because they don't want to let each other down, and because of the high standard they hold themselves to as United States Marines." Since 1775, those high standards and traditions have been handed down by the giants of the Corps. Drill instructors, fathers, brothers, sisters, and by a few of the brave who have earned the right to be called United States Marines.